Bulkeley is the oldest through station on Peckforton Light Railway. It has been serving passengers since the railway's inception in 2006. But it has changed over the past 17 years, as we shall see. Way back in 2003, the garden looked quite different. That pile of rubble is the site for Bulkeley Station. A year and a couple of tons of soil later, the landscaping of the garden was taking shape. Once the track was down and ballasted, I began to gain hope that at last my vision would be realised. Hopefully, you can see that the garden was beginning to look a lot more presentable, and Bulkeley now a bit less rubble-like. Train services started in 2007. In those days, my rolling stock was limited to an LGB starter set Staines loco and coaches and one solitary Accucraft van. Within a year, I had made a few wagons, but as you can see, there is no swing bridge, no station building, and no copper mine branch. All these were yet to come. The branch line to and from the copper mine is part of an illusion I have created to provide a link back up the line to the copper mine itself. It was created back in 2009 by firstly cutting a path through the foliage and flower bed, laying down my usual breeze block track bed, and then fixing the track in place. A year later, I made an overbridge to disguise the disappearance of the track behind the sheds by casting it in situ in concrete. A mould was made from a couple of pieces of plywood, tailored to fit the gap, with some coraflute wired into place beneath. Concrete was then poured into the mould and left to set. The texturing for the stonework was achieved with trails of hot glue inside the walls of the mould. The bridge has now been in place without any maintenance for 13 years. I did worry about frost damage initially, but so far, so good. The station building, which you can see behind the tractor, started life as a kid's toy, picked up in a charity shop for £5. The building was hacked about a bit, and then painted in Peckforton Light Railway colours. Its timber construction fits in well with the other railway buildings on the line. Here is how the swing bridge, just outside Bulkeley Station, looked shortly after it opened in 2009. It was used to span the gap to allow access to the shed in which we stored our trailer tent. For 3 years, a hinged plank served as a functional, if somewhat basic, bridge, until I discovered that the swing bridge across the River Blythe on the Southwold Railway was approximately the right length in 16mm scale. Mine was constructed from UPVC angle trim, following the precedent of a fellow modeller on the G-scale Central Forum. The sections were joined together with superglue, held in place with clothes pegs. When the 2 sides were completed, they were sprayed with Halford's grey primer from a rattle can and then screwed to the sides of the plank. If I had had the patience, I could have also made the open deck from angle trim and relied on the structural integrity of the bridge girders, but I decided against it. The same plank has now been in place for 17 years, and the UPVC girders for 14. This video clip, shot in 2022, shows how the swing bridge relates to the position of Bulkeley Station. Of course, in reality, there wouldn't have been the need for a swing bridge in the middle of rural Cheshire, but I reserve the right to exercise a modicum of modeller's licence. Back to 2011, and you can see that within a relatively short space of time, the Leylandii hedge behind the station has grown to be quite dense, and the foliage in front of the station has similarly become prolific. I had been toying with the idea of enlarging the station for some time, but in the meantime I made a few modifications to improve the goods handling facilities. In 2018, I added a loading bank to the siding, ostensibly to facilitate the loading of soft fruit from the local farms. This was cast in concrete with foam board edging slabs. Then, a year later, I added another siding to the opposite end of the passing loop. With the loading bank taking up most of the other siding, I figured there needed to be an additional siding for coal and general merchandise. And then, during the lockdowns of 2020, with plenty of time on my hands, I finally plucked up the courage to do what I'd been planning informally for years. Enlarge the goods yard at Bulkeley to provide space for a third siding and a new line-side industry, the boneworks, with the added bonus of a much more interesting junction for the copper mine branch and more space generally for the station yard. As you can see, the layout of Bulkeley Station was fairly compact. The original single siding, with a loading bank, is at the centre of the plan, while the second siding, at the opposite end of the passing loop, is in the top left corner. My intended plan was to add a third siding to the rear of the station yard, on which would be sited the boneworks, modelled in half relief. As it turned out, there was space to model the building in full depth. I was planning to move the loading bank to the upper left siding, but eventually it was easier to keep it in its original place, just above the word world. My first attempt involved moving the main line forward to provide space for the bonework siding. However, as you can see, the original siding was now precariously close to the edge of the raised bed. And so, the great advantage of a garden railway is that it's relatively easy to expand the area required for it, without the need for knocking down any walls. In fact, all you need to do is build a new one. The new station yard was now a lot more spacious. I'm really pleased with the outcome. There is now a much more open feel to the station yard and the copper mine branch junction. The Boneworks building is based on the Etruria bone mill, which is still in existence as a museum in Stoke-on-Trent. In the engine house, on the right of the building, is a beam engine, which I downloaded from Thingiverse and 3D printed. At present, the rest of the bone crushing and grinding machinery has yet to be modelled. I just need to visit the museum on their next open day to see the engine and machinery in action. The rest of Bulkeley Station has been remodelled slightly. The new layout has allowed the platform to be extended. As with the previous platform, this was cast in concrete in situ, but this time using plasticine moulds for the stonework edging. I have now removed the Leylandii hedging and created flower beds on the right-hand side of the up approach to the station. The planting here has yet to become established, and the Lonicera hedging behind it will take a couple of years to grow to sufficient height to mask the new workshop. But for now, I can find plenty of video viewpoints to avoid this as a background. And so, as we can see from this video of 2022, Bulkeley Station has evolved over the past 17 years. There are still a few areas to be tweaked and enhanced, but for now I'm happy with the stage it has reached.